She told me to be a good boy, but the way she looked at me that night made me forget what good even meant. I hadn't been back to this town in 4 years. Same cracked sidewalks, same faint smell of rain on old pavement, and that same wind that always carried a trace of cedar and nostalgia. Like it knew how to remind you of things you swore you'd forgotten. I came back for a summer job, nothing more. A chance to help at the local art center before moving on to the next phase of my life. I told myself it would be simple. Keep my head down, earn what I could, leave before the ghosts of this place started whispering again. The art building hadn't changed much. Still tucked behind the maple trees near the school. Still full of paint-stained easels and half-finished dreams. And when I stepped inside, the scent of linseed oil and varnish hit me like a wave of memory. And there she was, Elena Rivera. She stood near the back wall, sorting through a box of brushes, her dark hair tied loosely, a streak of silver catching the sunlight. Time had softened her, but it hadn't dimmed her presence. She had that same quiet grace I remembered, the kind that didn't demand attention but held it effortlessly. When she turned and saw me, her expression shifted. Surprise first, then a smile that felt both familiar and dangerous. "Daniel?" she said softly, as if testing whether it was really me. I nodded, suddenly aware of how young I still felt in front of her. "Hey, Ms. Rivera. It's been a while." Her laugh, low, warm, slipped into the room like sunlight through a curtain. "It's Elena now," she corrected gently. "I think you're past calling me Ms. Anything." It was such a small thing to say, but it unsettled something in me. Hearing her name without the title felt too intimate, like stepping across a threshold I hadn't meant to find. We talked for a while, mostly about the art program, the kids, the summer schedule, but my attention kept drifting to the way her sleeves were rolled up, a faint smudge of blue paint on her wrist, to the fine lines near her eyes that deepened when she smiled, to how her voice carried that calm steadiness that had once made the world feel safe. When she asked if I'd like to help organize the student exhibit, I said yes before my mind had even caught up. And as she walked me through the old studio, our footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floor, I realized something unexpected. The air between us wasn't the same as it used to be. It wasn't teacher and student anymore. It was two people, older now, both carrying invisible stories, standing in the same light, pretending it didn't feel different. When I left that day, the scent of paint still clinging to my clothes, I told myself it was just nostalgia. But the truth was simpler and much more dangerous. I hadn't come back to find her, but something in me already knew I wasn't leaving without her finding me first. I started work the next morning. The studio was already alive. Light spilling through the tall windows, dust drifting like tiny sparks in the air. Somewhere in the back, a kettle hissed. The familiar scrape of brushes echoed off the walls. Elena was standing by one of the tables, sleeves pushed up again, organizing jars of turpentine. She looked up when she heard me and smiled. The kind of smile that didn't rush, just unfolded slowly, as if she were deciding whether to give it fully. "Morning," she said. "You're early." I shrugged, pretending not to notice the warmth behind her tone. "Couldn't sleep." She gestured toward the workbench. "Then you can help me set up. We're short on volunteers. And please," she paused, looking straight at me, "no more Ms. Rivera, just Elena." It was a small correction, but it hit deeper than I expected. The word Elena felt too personal, like saying it out loud might draw me closer than I should be. For the next few hours we moved around the room in an easy rhythm, handing each other brushes, labeling canvases, rearranging easels. The air smelled of fresh paper and coffee. Every so often our hands brushed. Once when she passed me a palette, once when we both reached for the same sketchbook. Each time, she'd glance up, half smiling, and say nothing. At lunch, she sat across from me in the courtyard, legs crossed, sunlight warming the edge of her hair. She asked about my travels, my plans, my work. I told her I wasn't sure what I was chasing yet. She listened in that way she always had, patient, curious, never filling silence with noise. When I asked about her, she hesitated before answering. After the divorce, I needed to start over. This place felt safe. She smiled faintly, looking at the trees. But sometimes safe can turn into small. I don't want that. There was something in her voice. Not sadness exactly, more like quiet hunger. For color, for motion, for something to wake her again. The afternoon passed in easy talk and gentle laughter. She showed me her old studio at the back, dustier, more private. Her unfinished canvases leaned against the walls, colors dulled from neglect. I haven't painted in a while, she admitted. Too many excuses, not enough courage. Before I could stop myself, I said, then maybe you just need someone to remind you what it feels like. She looked at me, really looked, and for a second, the air between us changed. A slow heartbeat of silence. Then she smiled, soft but unreadable. Careful, Daniel. I might take that as a challenge. We both laughed, but something in that laughter lingered. A promise neither of us had made, but both of us had already heard. When I left that day, her voice followed me to the door. See you tomorrow, she said. And this time, it didn't sound like a formality. It sounded like an invitation. By the third week, the rhythm between us had settled into something quiet and familiar, but never comfortable. There was a pulse beneath it, a subtle awareness that neither of us spoke about, yet both of us felt. The studio had become our shared world. Mornings smelled of coffee and turpentine, and the floor was always dusted with pencil shavings and scraps of paper. The students adored her, especially the younger ones who crowded around her for guidance. I watched her move among them, calm and patient, her voice warm with encouragement. That afternoon, one of the little kids spilled a jar of water all over the floor. I crouched down to help, grabbing a rag before the puddle reached the canvases. Elena was right beside me, and for a few moments we worked side by side in silence, two pairs of hands wiping away the mess. When it was finally done, I looked up and found her watching me. There was amusement in her eyes, a hint of teasing that felt almost playful. You're always helping, aren't you? She said. I smiled, shrugging. Someone's got to keep things from falling apart. She tilted her head slightly, lips curving. Good boy. Two simple words, yet they landed in me like a spark against dry wood. Her tone wasn't mocking, but it wasn't neutral either. Carried warmth, something just a shade too intimate. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She must have felt it too, because she looked away quickly, brushing her palms on her jeans. Thank you, Daniel, she added, softer now, as if to smooth over the moment. But it was too late. The words lingered long after she walked away. Good boy. That evening, as I locked up the studio, I found myself thinking about her voice. How it had sounded like both a boundary and a test. Like she was reminding me of a line while daring me to notice where it was drawn. The next day, I tried to act normal. I greeted her with a smile, talked about the exhibit, laughed with the kids. But every time she came close, every time her sleeve brushed my arm or her hand steadied mine on a frame, my chest tightened with that same quiet electricity. Once, as she leaned over my shoulder to guide a pencil stroke, her breath brushed against my ear. You're holding it too tight, she murmured. My throat went dry. I turned slightly, catching her gaze. For a heartbeat, we were too close. Her perfume, her warmth, the soft rhythm of her breathing. And then she stepped back, laughing lightly to break the tension. Relax, she said. You're doing fine. Just be a good boy and trust your hands. She smiled, but her eyes flickered. Something unguarded, almost nervous. And I realized then, it wasn't just me. She felt it too. That night, lying awake, I kept hearing her voice replay in my mind. A gentle command that wasn't really about obedience at all, it was about control. And how easily both of us were beginning to lose it. The storm came without warning. By late afternoon, clouds had rolled over the hills, heavy and blue-black. The last students hurried out before the rain broke, and within minutes the windows rattled under the wind. Elena stood by the door, watching the sky flash silver. Looks like we're trapped for a bit, she said with a small laugh. I offered to stay and help close up. She didn't argue. We moved through the dim studio, stacking stools, covering paints, the rhythm of our movements slowed by the rain hammering the roof. When the lights flickered, she lit a few candles from the emergency kit. Their glow threw warm gold across her face, softening every edge. She looked younger, almost unguarded. For a while, we talked about small things, the exhibit, the students, the way storms used to scare her when she was little. But the conversation drifted. Maybe it was the sound of rain muffling the world, or the way the candlelight made everything feel distant from rules and routine. I found myself asking, "Why did you stop painting?" She hesitated, tracing a finger along the rim of her mug. "Because when you lose someone who believed in you, it's easier to stop than to start again." The words hung there. I wanted to say something comforting, but all that came out was, "You still have that in you, Elena. I see it every time you look at a canvas." Her eyes lifted to mine, steady and searching. "You see too much sometimes," she murmured. The storm deepened, thunder rolling across the fields. She picked up a brush, almost absently, and dipped it into the leftover paint. The color caught the light like molten bronze. Without thinking, I handed her a blank sheet. "Try," I said. She smiled, reluctant but curious. The first stroke was clumsy, then another followed, and soon she was lost in motion. I stood close, holding the candle as she worked. The soft hiss of rain mixed with the sweep of her brush. A streak of paint landed across her cheek. I reached out, instinctively, and stopped halfway, uncertain. She caught the hesitation, then tilted her head just enough for permission. My thumb brushed the mark away, slow and careful. Her skin was warm beneath the faint tremor of my hand. She didn't pull back, but her breath hitched. So quietly I might have imagined it. For a heartbeat, the world felt suspended. Candlelight, rain, two people balanced between past and possibility. Then she exhaled, stepped back, and set the brush down. "That's enough for tonight," she said, her voice steady again. We cleaned in silence. When the storm finally eased, she walked me to the door. "Thank you," she said, "for reminding me." I nodded, not trusting words. The rain had stopped, but the air still shimmered with the electricity it left behind. The kind that doesn't fade when the clouds clear. After the storm, Elena kept her distance. The next few days felt different, quieter, careful. She still greeted me with her warm half-smile, but her eyes never lingered long. When I spoke, she listened, but there was a faint edge in her tone, a wall she was rebuilding piece by piece. I told myself it was fine, that what had passed between us in the candlelight meant nothing. But each time I saw her reach for a paintbrush, I remembered the moment my hand had touched her skin, and how neither of us had stepped away until we had to. By Friday, I couldn't take the distance anymore. The exhibit was coming together, and everyone else had gone home early. I saw her sitting alone in the park across from the studio, sketchbook balanced on her knees, dusk turning her silhouette gold. I walked up quietly. "You're hiding," I said. She didn't look up. "Maybe I'm protecting." "From what?" "From myself," she murmured. "And maybe from you." The wind stirred the pages of her sketchbook. She'd been drawing a landscape, but the lines were faint, unfinished. "Elena," I said, soft but steady. "If I did something wrong." Her pencil stilled. "You didn't. That's the problem." She finally looked at me then. The honesty in her eyes was sharp enough to hurt. "You make me feel things I thought I'd put away. You look at me like I'm still worth seeing." My throat tightened. "You are." She shook her head, smiling sadly. "You're kind, and young, and still believe that wanting something makes it right." I sat beside her on the bench, leaving a respectful space between us. The air smelled of grass and coming rain again. "I don't see right or wrong," I said quietly. "I see two people trying not to be lonely in the same place." For a moment she didn't speak. Then, almost a whisper, "You should be a good boy and walk away." Something about the way she said it, not firm, not teasing this time, made it sound like a plea. "I don't think I can," I admitted. Her hand trembled slightly as she closed the sketchbook. I reached over, covering her hand with mine. Her fingers were cold at first, then relaxed beneath my touch. "Daniel?" She breathed my name like an apology. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I just don't want to pretend it doesn't matter. She turned toward me, eyes glistening. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then she leaned forward, not enough to close the distance, just enough that I could feel her breath. I can't promise you anything, she whispered. I'm not asking you to, I said. Just don't shut the door. The silence stretched, soft, trembling, full of things unsaid. Then she nodded once, barely. Then maybe, she said, voice unsteady. We stop making rules we both keep breaking. The week before the exhibit felt heavier than any before it. Deadlines, framing, last-minute corrections. And under it all, that quiet current between us that neither of us dared to name. One night, I stayed late to finish mounting the pieces. The others had gone home hours ago. I didn't realize she was still there until I heard the soft click of her heels on the wooden floor. You should have told me you were working late, Elena said, setting down 2 cups of coffee. You don't have to do everything alone. I smiled. I could say the same about you. She laughed, tired but genuine. And for the first time in days, the tension cracked just enough for warmth to slip through. We worked side by side in the quiet, measuring, hanging frames, adjusting lights. Every so often our shoulders brushed, small accidental touches that felt anything but accidental. After a while she stood back, studying the wall of paintings. The glow from the track lights haloed her profile. You know, she said, I forgot what this felt like. Seeing my students' work finished, the room alive again. It's because of you, I said. You brought it back. She turned toward me. No, you did. For a moment neither of us moved. The hum of the lights filled the silence. Then she took a slow breath. I told myself not to depend on anyone again. I've spent years building walls that looked a lot like stability. And now, I asked. She gave a small, fragile smile. Now you make me wonder what I built them for. Something in her tone loosened the space between us. She stepped closer, enough that I could see the faint smear of charcoal on her wrist, the tired shimmer in her eyes. Daniel, she said quietly, I don't know where this is supposed to go. Maybe we don't need to know, I answered. Maybe it's enough that we're both here. She studied me for a long moment, then reached up to fix a crooked frame beside my head. Her hand brushed my sleeve, the lightest contact, and stayed there, steady, trusting. The air thickened with unspoken things, but neither of us crossed further. We just stood there, breathing in the same rhythm, listening to the city rain start up again beyond the windows. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I told you to be a good boy. I met her eyes. Maybe being good isn't the same as being honest. A faint laugh escaped her. Not amused, more like relief. She let her hand fall away and turned toward the half-finished display. Then tonight we'll be honest, she said. Just don't make promises we can't keep. We finished the setup in near silence, calm and sure. When it was done, she thanked me, her hand brushing mine once more. Not in invitation, but in gratitude. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the scent of it lingered, cool, clean, and full of possibility. The morning of the exhibit arrived with the soft kind of sunlight that makes everything look honest. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. Volunteers hurried about, straightening tables and stringing lights. The gallery buzzed with the kind of nervous joy that always comes before people arrive. Elena was there early, walking through the room with her clipboard and her calm authority, checking every last detail. When she saw me, she smiled. Not the guarded one she'd worn lately, but something lighter, freer. You actually slept last night? I asked. Barely, she said, adjusting a frame. But it's a good kind of tired. There was a faint glow about her, something that came not from rest but from relief, the peace of someone who'd finally let herself feel again. Guests began to trickle in. Laughter filled the room, followed by polite clinking glasses and the low hum of conversation. The students stood near their work, proud and fidgety, pointing out colors and brushstrokes to anyone who would listen. I stayed near the corner, watching her move through the crowd. The way she greeted every parent, every child, every old colleague who'd come to see her. She carried herself with quiet confidence, but every now and then her eyes would find mine. Just a glance, nothing more, but it was enough. When the speeches ended, she walked over to where I stood by one of the large canvases we'd hung together. "You did a good job," she said softly. "We did," I corrected. She smiled, and for a second neither of us looked away. Around us, people moved and talked and laughed, but the sound faded into a kind of background music. "Do you ever think about what happens next?" I asked. Her eyes softened. "All the time, but for once, I'm not trying to plan it." She reached up, brushing at my sleeve as if to dust off something invisible. It was a small gesture, domestic and fleeting, but it carried the weight of everything unspoken between us. "Daniel," she said quietly, "whatever this has been, it's reminded me that I'm still capable of beginning again, and that matters more than anything else." I nodded, trying to memorize the moment, the color of her eyes, the light behind her. "I'm glad," I said. "You deserve that." The crowd called her name then, pulling her back to the center of the room. She gave me one last look before turning away, the kind of look that said goodbye and thank you and maybe someday all at once. Hours later, after the exhibit ended and the lights dimmed, I walked past the wall where her new painting now hung. It was a landscape, open sky, wide horizon, streaks of gold cutting through gray. At the bottom corner, her signature curved softly across the paint. Below it, in small handwriting, she'd added 2 words, "Be honest." I smiled to myself, the memory of her voice echoing somewhere between my ribs. For the first time since I'd come home, I didn't feel like I was running anymore. Sometimes breaking the rules isn't about rebellion. It's about finally telling the truth. Headphone if you felt something in this story. The quiet ache, the longing, the beauty of connection. Don't forget to subscribe. Every week, I share another slow burn story about love that grows where it shouldn't, yet finds a way to bloom anyway. Speech Balloon, leave a comment. What part of their story stayed with you most? Your thoughts might inspire the next one.